Russia is warning that it will have to take what it calls military technical steps in response to Finland's decision to join NATO. Finland's leaders say they want to join the alliance without delay. Moscow says the move will, quote, inflict serious damage on Russian-Finnish relations, as well as stability and security in Northern Europe. The two countries share a land border, which is more than 1,300 kilometers long. Neighboring Sweden is expected to decide on joining NATO within the coming days. Joining us now to discuss these events is Dr. Balkan Devlen, foreign policy expert and senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Dr. Devlen, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me again.
Now, besides Russia's war in Ukraine, what other reasons does Finland have to join NATO?
Russia's war in Ukraine is the primary impetus today. So far, since the end of Second World War, Finland had pursued a policy that very much relies on self-defense, but was very careful in its relations with Russia. And one of the primary things when you talk with the Finnish politicians, they would always highlight the fact that the population, by and large, is not going to be supportive of formal membership in NATO. That doesn't mean that NATO did not work very closely with Finland and Sweden and cooperate in many different areas. But a formal membership have been very, the Finnish public have been skeptical. Russia's war in Ukraine since 2014 started to change the dynamics, but of course the recent invasion, re-invasion in February 24th, really, decisively shifted public opinion, both in Finland and Sweden, heavily favored in favor of formal membership in NATO.
All right, well, we mentioned Moscow is responding by warning Finland about military technical steps. So how might Russia respond to an expanded NATO alliance?
I think there will be a couple of different ways they can respond. I think sort of one of the issues they will probably double down on is their subversion attempts and hybrid warfare structures targeting our democratic institutions and civil society and press, as well as cyber capabilities. Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine creates a significant drain on Russia's resources. So I do not necessarily expect a much, sort of a military activity. There will be some. They continue to violate, both NATO airspace as well as Swedish and occasionally Finnish airspace. We probably will see some exercises in the north, in the Baltics, as well as in the Arctic, as sort of a warning as both Finland and Sweden moves towards NATO. But in practice, in practical terms, I think what Russia could do, especially on the military side, is quite limited right now, partly because their resources are heavily stretched because of their botched operation in Ukraine.
All right, well, for some more broader perspective for our viewers, what are some potential impacts of Finland and Sweden joining NATO and how they might be felt outside of Europe?
No, I think it's going to be a great boon in terms of security in the Nordic and the Baltic region. Our Baltic allies, as well as Germany and Poland, very much, and Denmark, of course, and Norway, very much welcome both Swedish and Finnish participation. Like I said, the cooperation was already there, very closely working, but this would enable both Finland and Norway to be able to develop better interoperability with its EU allies. Both countries are EU members, which also have, I think, a significant impact on the Arctic, which is, of course, important for Canada. With Finland and Sweden joining NATO, Russia will be the only country in the Arctic Council as the non-NATO country. So Arctic will very solidly become a northern flank for NATO, an Arctic flank, and we need to think through the implications of that and how that will strengthen Canada's security in the Arctic. So we need to pay much closer attention to it, and I think it's a net advantage and net positive for Canada to have strong militaries, capable militaries such as Finland and Sweden joining in NATO, not only in the eastern flank and the Baltics, but also for the Arctic. So I think that's very good news.
A lot to keep our eyes out for. Dr. Devlen, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Stay with us. Up next, we've got more news from around the world as North Korea fires ballistic missiles while they impose a countrywide lockdown to control a COVID-19 outbreak. Qatar's emir meets with Iran's president to support and revive a nuclear deal. U.S. President Joe Biden appeals for a renewed international commitment to fighting the spread of COVID-19. And Costa Rica declares a state of emergency due to crippling ransomware attacks. We'll have these stories and more coming up next.